Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel Reviewed, where we talk about all things television and film from today and yesteryear. So today I wanted to come on here and do a brief recap of the movie Woman in the Yard. This movie is centered around a lady named Ramona who is currently dealing with the loss of her husband. So Ramona and her kids are currently living on a property that was purchased by her and her husband. The home is a fixer-upper. They have a couple of chickens, so it's giving off farm vibes. They got a lot of land, a lot of yard. And at the beginning of the movie, we do get to see her and her husband having a conversation about what they were going to name the farm. You know, so I'm not sure how long they've had this particular property, but this is where they are currently residing, her and her children. So the mom, she is doing what she can, given her circumstances, and she, going through the mail, and she ends up finding this card of, someone sending the condolences for her loss. And at this time, they do not have power in their house. Ramona and her kids, they're having breakfast, and her son asked, he was like, "When is the power going to be back on?" It's just like, it should be back on sometime today, later on tonight, no later than tomorrow. And the son is like, "Oh man, well, can we just go to, so and so's house, a neighbor?" And she's like, "No, we'll be fine. Just make sure you don't keep opening and closing the refrigerator because we want the food to stay cool, and not spoil." And while she's saying this, she's eating the eggs that her son cooked. Honey, he didn't put some Doritos in the scrambled eggs. Okay. Everybody starts cracking up. And then the dog ends up getting sick on its stomach because they ran out of dog food. And, she's asking the son, she's like, "What did you feed him?" He was like, "Whatever was available. He doesn't have any dog food." And so she was like, "Okay, well, just add that to the grocery list." And, so after they have breakfast, they notice that they have a visitor in their front yard. So her daughter Annie, she looks out the window and she's like, "Mom, who is that lady?" And of course, Ramona is like, "I have no idea." So of course, everyone is trying to figure out who this woman is because she literally appears out of nowhere. And the son is like, "Mom, like, how's she just gonna be posted up like that? Like, she's literally sitting in a chair. She got all this black on, covered up in the sun, just sitting out there." And Ramona's like, "I don't know." She's like, "I'm not sure. Maybe she is confused, or she could possibly be, someone from a mental hospital." But basically, she about to go find out who is in her yard. So Ramona, she makes her way out to the yard. And to be clear, I don't know if this is their front yard or backyard. Nonetheless, she is making her way out to her yard. She is taking her time. She's being very cautious, honey. And I guess basically paying attention to her surroundings too, just in case, somebody else pop up. But she makes her way out to the yard, okay? And while Ramona is making her way across the yard, honey, the dog is barking his face off. Okay. Like, y'all know what they say about animals. Animals can sense evil, or paranormal type stuff. So the fact that this dog is barking like that, she should have been like, "Okay, let me go back in the house." Unfortunately, she did not. She sits up there and she starts fussing at the dog, telling the dog to shut up. And the dog, like, "Girl, I'm trying to help you out. What you mean, shut up?" Okay. So as Ramona gets closer to the woman, now mind you, she don't get too close to her, honey. She still keeps her distance. She's still a couple of feet away, but she's yelling in a pleasant voice, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need assistance? Can I help you? Are you lost? Are you confused? What's going on?" And the woman was like, "No, I'm fine." And so when the woman is speaking, you can hear like a distorted tone in the back of her voice, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to say she sounds demonic because, we've seen in movies and heard in movies how people sound who are demonic. So I don't want to say it sounds like that, but you could tell that there is some type of evil, I guess, in her tone. Even though she is not yelling and the way that she's speaking, you could still hear it. Nonetheless, Ramona is just like, "Okay, well, if you're not lost and ain't nothing going on, then what are you doing here?" And the woman was like, "I'm here because you called, because you asked me to be here." And Ramona's like, "Oh, okay." So, at this point, Ramona's like, "Okay, this woman is crazy." So she tells her, she says, "Well, can you please leave my property? If you ain't injured or nothing, you need to leave, you need to move." And so the woman doesn't say anything. And Ramona's like, "My husband will be home soon and he's not going to like you, just sitting up in front of our house like this. And so after she says that, the woman says, your husband's not coming anywhere. And she was like, he's not coming home. And she also says to Ramona, she said, I see you were the lucky one. And she's talking about Ramona's leg injury. And for whatever reason, the vehicle that the accident happened in, the one that, ultimately sent her husband to be with the Grim Reaper honey, the vehicle is still sitting in the front yard and it's covered up. So once she says that to Ramona, Ramona is looking at her crazy and she's like, excuse me, what did you say? And the lady was like,
Today's the day, Ramona. You called and I came. Today's the day.
so, Ramona goes back in the home and her son is asking her questions like, what's going on? Who is this woman? Why is she still out there? And, Ramona basically comes up with some type of excuse or whatever. It's like, maybe she'll leave on her own, don't worry about it. But of course, the son is concerned. And, throughout the movie and this particular time here, after she goes back in the house after speaking with the woman, she starts having all these weird ideations or whatever. Now, keep in mind, her son, who can be very disrespectful, he, he got his eye on what's going on outside. He's already upset about them not having power. He's like, I don't understand why I can't go to the neighbor's house or to my friend's home. Why can't we just get in the car and leave? But little does he know that the vehicle that is in the garage, it is currently not working. Of course, he ends up finding that out later. But nonetheless, Ramona, she is tired of her son's attitude. She does have to check him to let him know basically, I don't play the radio. Like, you're not going to be trying to, test me right now. We are dealing with, I'm going through a lot. Like, I don't have time for that. So her son, he could be low key disrespectful to her. Also, she kind of takes the frustrations out on her daughter as well. Her daughter was practicing writing and she wrote her R backwards. And, she yells at her for doing that. And then she later, she apologizes to her daughter, tell her that she's sorry and she loves her or whatnot. Again, like I said, the son, he ain't playing, baby. He got his eyes outside, on that woman in the chair. Like he literally was sitting there like, yeah, nah, something is up and I'm not feeling it. But Ramona, it seems like she starts to have these occurrences where she is seeing things that are not there. And it's like this started to happen after she had her interaction with the woman in the yard. So when she's hugging her daughter, she literally sees herself stabbing her daughter. And it's like, okay, what's going on? Because we know that the woman in the yard is not a hallucination, that it's not just all in her head, because her kids were able to see this woman too. But clearly her Ramona's mind is playing tricks on her, because the fact that she saw herself stab her daughter. There was also a moment where she picked a knife up like she was going to throw it at her son, because he kept throwing this ball and bouncing this ball against the wall, just being disrespectful. And so it's like her interaction with that woman made more of her anger come to surface with her kids, if that makes sense. At one point of the movie, her daughter, she ends up hurting her foot. I think she cuts it or whatever. And so she takes her into the bathroom to bandage up her foot. And at this point, when she does that, her son takes it upon himself to go get, the firearm. He was like, I'm tired of seeing this lady sitting out here. I don't know what's going on. Sidebar, y'all peep the Pattern Beauty products in the background. I see you, Tracy Ellis Ross. Anyway, so the son, he goes and grabs his dad's rifle and he is headed out the door, because he's like, he's tired of seeing that lady sitting there. Like, what is really going on? But on his way out the door, it was this picture that was on the wall. And if you don't pay attention to it, you could kind of miss it. The cameras do zoom in on it, but it's kind of really fast. So you have to, catch it. But anyway, this particular picture here, I was like, okay, so is this a representation of the woman that's in the yard? Because as you can see, there is a veil covering her eyes, but from the nose down, you can kind of see her face. And the mouth, I don't know if that redness is a tongue or if it's blood, but nonetheless, when he goes out the door to confront the woman, this picture is on the wall. So he goes out there and he let her know, it's up and it's stuck. Like, ma'am, what are you doing here? What do you want? So as he's coming down the stairs, she starts to approach him. So, she's looking at the son and he basically, he got the rifle at her and he was like, you better back down or I'm gonna pull the trigger. And she was like, I know you will, but she is, calm. And so in this moment, I'm like, okay, so who is this woman? Because, is she an ancestor? Is this someone that they know? Because when you think about it, when Ramona first approached her, she was covered up. And now that her face is being shown, it clearly it's not someone, a family member or anything like that, because the son, she's still unrecognizable to him. And, he was like, what do you want? My mom told you to leave our property and you still here. And, so the woman starts saying things to him and she mentions their dad. And he was like, what do you know about my father? Like, you're not going to be talking about him. And at this point, the son is getting very upset. And the woman, she was like, the whole situation about your father and what happened is not the truth. And so when she's saying this, the boy, he starts to pull the rifle down. Like, what do you mean it's not true? And she basically says to him,
Your mama told it all backwards.
so after the woman in the yard says to the son, that your mom lied about the situation that happened with her dad, we get this flashback of the night that her husband passed. Okay. So they went to a restaurant and they were having a conversation because Ramona is not happy. Her husband, he is sitting there. He was like, I got this house. I told you what I wanted to do. It was going to be a fixer upper. He said, I told you I wanted to, we wanted to move, live outside the city. He said, now we get the home and you're still not happy. And, she admits to him that she's not. And I'm like, okay, what is going on with her? Because is she depressed? And so that's when stuff for me started clicking down like, okay, maybe she is depressed, because the conversation that they were having at this table, it was just as though he was trying to um, do things to make her happy. You understand? Like, he just wanted her to be satisfied and be happy. And he was like, we done left the city, we're in the country, and now you're still not happy. It's still not enough. And she basically tells him that it's not. So to me, she was just dealing with some things within herself where she needed to find her happy place. And it just seems like regardless of whatever her husband tried to do for her, it just wasn't good enough, because she needed the happiness to come from within and not from him or anything that he was able to do for her. So she ends up getting up and leaving the table. And we get a moment where we see her. She's the one who was driving the car. She was the one who was driving the car, but her husband ultimately ended up passing away. And this information is something she did not tell her kids, mainly her son, because I'm sure the little girl Annie wouldn't understand because she's so young. But she did not tell the truth as to what ended up happening the night that her husband passed away. So while we're getting a flash of what actually happened the night, David, which was the husband when he passed away, the house starts having like this paranormal stuff going on, like all these shadows and things like that. And honey, when I tell you the shadows was something else, because you would see the person, but their shadows in the wall would be completely different. It was all kinds of crazy. It started to get just a little bit spooky. And one thing about this movie was very dark. And when I say dark, I mean that in a literal sense. Like, a lot of the scenes from this film was shot in dark places. You know what I'm saying? Like the attic or at night outside, it was dark. So this is not a movie I would recommend that you watch on like your phone or a tablet. Like, you need to watch it on a TV screen so you can see everything, just in case there's certain things that you miss. But honey, in this particular moment here, this shadow is dragging the little girl by her foot on the floor. Like, it literally drags her. Okay. And this is just another example of the shadows that were in the house. Like, it was like you would be looking at one thing, but the shadow on the wall or on the floor would be something totally different. It was very eerie, kind of creepy. So we get a moment where Ramona, she has a flash of her husband, and at the beginning of the movie, you see them discussing what they're going to name their house. Because again, like I said, it's like a little farm or whatever. And so the conversation that they're having in this moment here is similar to the conversation that we saw the movie open up with. But in this particular moment, of course, things go awry, and we see David try to harm Ramona, but she ends up waking up out of that particular scenario. But when she opens her eyes, she is now the woman in the yard. Okay. She has the veil covering her face, and she is looking out, and she is seeing herself on the crutches coming towards her, asking her, is she okay? Does she need help? The same scenario we saw Ramona do with the actual woman in the yard. She is now having that ideation of it being done to herself by her. So she starts to pull the veil off of her face, Ramona does. And it just, for me, I thought it wasn't going to come off. It just seemed like it was never ending. Like the veil was going to stay on her. Like it was just like she was going to come be pulling it off, and it was just going to be this elongated veil, but it wasn't. And she ends up saying to herself,
Today's the day. Today's the day, Ramona.
so Ramona ultimately ends up confronting the woman. Okay. So she is asking the woman, like, what do you want? And the woman's like, I'm here. I'm basically answering your call. And so we get a flash of Ramona, when she wakes up in the morning, she always says, give me the strength. And so this woman, to me, in this moment, I was like, okay, so the saying where they say face your demons. So I'm like, so this woman literally is a demon slash grim reaper. Like, honey, she's here to collect your soul. Okay. And also, I was wondering if this woman was a representation of Ramona's guilt and grief. Okay. So, back at the restaurant, when we saw Ramona basically tell her husband that she wasn't happy, it's like she just wasn't satisfied with nothing. I'm wondering if she just suffered from depression, and that depression carried over into her grief from losing her husband, and then the guilt of what actually happened, because we did see that she was the one driving the car and she survived. Okay. So to me, it's like all of that manifested into this woman. And the woman is basically there to guide Ramona into taking her own life, because she says to her, you got rid of all the bullets except one, when it came to her husband's rifle, Ramona's husband's rifle. And so in this moment, I'm like, okay, so you're here to guide her along the journey of unaliving herself. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, this is crazy. So I'm assuming, again, to me, what I summarized was that the woman is just a representation of the darkness that has been in Ramona. Okay. And so once Ramona realizes who she is and what she is there for, instead of her rebuking her, okay, like rebuking her in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, honey, ma'am goes and says, are my kids gonna be okay? Like, girl. So, she asked the woman, she said, are my kids gonna be okay? And the woman basically is like, yeah, they're gonna be okay as long as you're not around. So the woman, she shows Ramona a preview of what her kids' life is gonna be like. And again, she already told Ramona they have a better chance at life without you in it. So she is weighing on extra thick, on top of the guilt and grief and depression, I'm assuming that Ramona is already feeling, because she is there to collect her soul. Like, girl, this right here irked me so bad, because I'm like, there is no way this woman could be this selfish. Ramona, it's no way she could be this selfish. And I'm like, okay, like, come on, what is really going on here? So after Ramona sees the ideation that her children are going to be okay, she goes and gets her kids and she takes them outside and she tells them to go ahead and go to the neighbor's house. You know, and of course the kids are like, okay, cool. You know, they think that she's coming with them. It's just like, no, I'll be alone. You know, it's some stuff I need to do here. So she is making sure that her kids are out of the house as she prepares to go be with the Grim Reaper. So she goes back upstairs and she sits in this chair, and the woman basically is trying to assist her with, you know, unaliving herself. And or I'm gonna call her the Grim Reaper because that's what I call it. That's what I like to say, Grim Reaper. Okay. And the Grim Reaper is sitting there hovering over her, literally coasting her on what to do in order to take herself out. And I am so glad that she did not do it. Okay. So if y'all ain't seen the movie, that's a spoiler. Okay, I'm just letting you know. I am so glad that she did not do that because I'm like, how selfish can you be? Um, you know, that oh my gosh, if it had ended the other way, I don't know. I mean, the movie still left me with my mouth open, okay? Because again, once she decided that she wanted to be there for her children, it's like the woman, she disappeared. So again, I'm like, that's it. Like, we didn't get any explanation. We didn't get any detailed information on who this woman actually was. So for me, the woman was her depression, her grief, and her guilt that just actually manifested into that particular person, entity, whatever you want to call it, or the Grim Reaper, as I say, because honey, she was definitely there to collect her soul. Okay, so she gets her kids back. You know, she goes to get her kids, and then once they go home, the power is back on. And I'm like, so what's the whole representation of the power being out? Just the representation of darkness, period. Because she was dealing with darkness in the house because she had no power. And then here you got this woman dressed in all black sitting in your yard, honey, who definitely represented darkness, okay? Darkness that you felt inside of you. And yeah, I don't know. The way it ended, I'm glad it ended the way that it did. Like I said, I'm so glad that Ramona thought enough of her children to not be selfish, to remove herself from their life. You know what I'm saying? Even though the woman made it seem like they would be better off without her. And I'm assuming that has to do with the fact that again, this is my opinion, I believe that Ramona does suffer from depression. Okay. So there's this painting that is shown at the end of the movie, and as you can see, it's clearly Ramona's face. And, you know, you got all that extra paint on top of it, and at the bottom, you see Ramona's name, but it's backwards. Okay, all the letters are backwards, and I was like, okay, so is this portrait like a representation just saying that her life is a mess, but she's pushing through, which is why you can see her face so clearly, but you got all this green stuff or whatever all strewn upon her actual face in the painting. I actually did like this movie. I was surprised that I liked it as much as I did. Um, Again, the movie is very dark as far as how it looks, so I don't recommend you watch this on your phone or iPad because you would miss some things because a lot of the movie is shot like in the dark or whatever at night. Shout out to Danielle Deadweiler who played Ramona. She's such a good actress. I've seen her in quite a bit of television and series, movies or whatever. She's a really good actress. Um, this movie for me though, I just wish we had got a little bit more background on why Ramona just seemingly was not happy. Like, did she ever come across the woman in the yard before? Because at the end of the movie, she says that she's gone and she won't be back, but if she comes back, I'll be ready. And I'm like, did she experience this woman before? And we just don't know. Like, I kind of wish we had got a little bit more background on Ramona. And if she was depressed, if that's something that she's always dealt with or whatnot. And, you know, just a little bit more information in reference to that. Because again, I could be completely wrong, honey. The woman in the yard could have been just that. Okay, she could not have been a manifestation of Ramona's grief or guilt or depression. She just could have been there to collect her soul. Okay, the Grim Reaper in the flesh as a woman. Okay, I don't know, but I did enjoy the movie, and I will definitely rewatch. Okay. Well, that's all I have for you guys today in this video. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate the support, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.